Mason Cole didn't lower his voice. He stood in the middle of that crowded coffee shop, gripping Claire's wrist too tight, and told her in front of every stranger there that she would die alone. He said it smiling. He said her family only asked about him because they pitied her. Then he leaned close and whispered the cruelest thing of all. He said no man would ever pretend to love her, let alone mean it. And Claire, 28 years old and shaking, believed him. Before we go on, if this story pulls you in, please subscribe to the channel and stay with me all the way to the end because it changes in ways you will not expect. And do me one small favor. Leave a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see just how far this story has traveled tonight. Ethan Parker heard the front door slam before he heard her cry. He was standing at the stove, still in his scrubs, stirring a pot of soup he was too tired to taste, when Claire came through the door and dropped her keys on the counter like they weighed 40 pounds. She didn't say hello. She didn't take off her coat. She just leaned against the wall by the refrigerator and pressed both hands over her face. "Claire." She didn't answer. "Hey, Claire, what happened?" "Nothing happened," she said, and her voice cracked right down the middle of the word. Ethan turned off the burner. 2 years of living with someone teaches you the sound of a real nothing, and the sound of a nothing that means everything. This was the second kind. "You're shaking," he said. "I'm cold. It's July." She laughed, but it came out wrong, more like a sob wearing a laugh's clothes. She slid down the wall until she was sitting on the kitchen floor with her knees pulled up, and Ethan came and sat down across from her, right there on the cheap tile, because that was the kind of friendship they had. You didn't wait for the other person to stand up. You got down on the floor with them. "Talk to me," he said. "I saw Mason today." Ethan went very still. He knew that name the way you know the name of a storm that already tore your roof off once. Mason Cole. The man Claire had spent 3 years trying to please and 2 years trying to forget. The man her family still asked about at every holiday like he was a son they had misplaced. "Where?" Ethan said. Not a question. A warning shaped like one. "The coffee shop on Franklin. I didn't even know he was back in town. I was just standing in line and he came up behind me and grabbed my arm and started talking like nothing had ever happened." She wiped her face with the back of her hand. "He said my family only asks about him because they feel sorry for me. He said I was going to end up alone. He said that to you, out loud, in public. He was smiling the whole time, Ethan. That's the part I can't get out of my head. He was smiling." Ethan felt something hot move up the back of his neck, and he made himself breathe before he spoke, because the first 3 things he wanted to say were not things a decent man says out loud. "He's wrong," Ethan said instead. "You know that, right? He's wrong about all of it." "Am I supposed to know that? Because my whole family agrees with him." "That's not true." "It is true." She looked up at him, and her eyes were red and furious and afraid all at once. "My mom called me this morning, before Mason. That's why the whole thing hit like a truck. She called me to tell me about the reunion." "What reunion?" "The family reunion. It's every summer up in Willow Creek, Grandma Evelyn's house. The whole family shows up, aunts, uncles, cousins, everybody." Claire dragged in a shaky breath. "And every single year somebody corners me and asks when Mason and I are getting back together. Every year. Like the last 3 years never happened, like I've just been up here in Nashville waiting for him to come to his senses. So tell them the truth. Tell them it's over." "I have told them. 100 times. They don't hear it. My mom actually said, and I quote, she said, 'Honey, you know your grandmother isn't going to be around forever, and she just wants to see you settled with a good man before she goes.'" Ethan winced. "That's a heavy thing to put on you." "It gets worse." Claire pressed her lips together, and Ethan watched her decide whether to say the next part. "Grandma Evelyn's heart is bad. It's been bad for a while, but it's worse now. My mom said this reunion might be the last one where she's really, herself. And she said Evelyn's been telling everyone she has one wish left. She wants to meet the man who's going to take care of me." "Oh, Claire." "So there I am on the phone at 7 in the morning, and my mom is basically saying my grandmother's dying wish is a boyfriend I don't have." Her voice broke again. "And then, 2 hours later, Mason grabs my arm in a coffee shop and tells me I'll be alone forever. So you'll have to forgive me if I'm a little bit not okay right now." For a long moment, neither of them said anything. The soup sat cooling on the stove. Somewhere down the hall, a neighbor's television murmured through the wall. "What did you tell your mom?" Ethan asked quietly, and that was when Claire stopped meeting his eyes. "Claire, what did you tell her?" "I panicked." "What did you say?" "I told her I was seeing someone." Ethan closed his eyes. Okay, we can work with that. You just tell her it didn't work out. People say they're seeing someone and then it ends all the time. That's normal, that's fine. I told her I'd bring him to the reunion." Ethan opened his eyes. "And she asked his name," Claire whispered. "Claire." "And I said the first name that came into my head." The kitchen went so quiet, Ethan could hear the refrigerator humming behind him. He looked at her. She looked at the floor. And slowly, like a man watching a car roll toward a cliff in slow motion, he understood. "No," he said. "Ethan, you did not." "I'm so sorry. It just came out. She asked his name and your name was it was right there. You were the first person. You're always the first person. And I said, Ethan. I said his name is Ethan, and she got so happy. She got so happy that I couldn't." "Claire, you told your mother you're dating me." "I know. You told your dying grandmother's family that I'm your boyfriend." I know. She had her face in her hands again. "I'll fix it. I'll call her back tonight and I'll say I made a mistake and I'll tell them the truth and I'll let them all look at me the way they always look at me. And Mason will be right and Grandma Evelyn will spend her last summer knowing I'm exactly the failure everybody thinks I am. It's fine. I'll fix it. I'll fix." She was crying in earnest now, the kind of crying that has years behind it, and Ethan sat on the kitchen floor and felt his anger at Mason and his loyalty to Claire and his own good sense all crashing into each other at once. "Don't call her," he heard himself say. Claire looked up. "What?" He couldn't believe the words were coming out of his own mouth. Somewhere in the back of his mind, a calm and reasonable voice was telling him to stop telling him this was the exact kind of decision people spend years regretting. He didn't listen to it. "Don't call her tonight," Ethan said. "Don't tell her anything. Just don't fix it yet." "Ethan, I can't ask you to. You didn't ask. I'm offering. You don't even understand what you'd be walking into. My family is a lot. My brother Tyler is relentless. My dad will grill you about your job and your intentions and your 5-year plan. And Grandma Evelyn, she sees everything. She's like a human lie detector. She has been since I was a little girl." "It's one weekend," Ethan said. "One dinner. I show up, I'm polite. I hold your hand a couple of times, I let your dad grill me. Then we come home, and in a month or two, you tell them we drifted apart, and it's nobody's fault, and nobody has to know it was ever a lie. And your grandmother gets her wish. She gets to see you happy, even if it's just for a weekend." Claire stared at him like he'd offered to carry her across the ocean on his back. "Why would you do that for me?" she said. And Ethan, who was very good at answering medical questions and very bad at answering questions like that one, just shrugged and said the safest true thing he could find. "Because Mason Cole doesn't get the last word," he said. "Not on my watch." Claire laughed, wet and surprised, and for the first time since she'd walked through the door, something in her shoulders let go. Pod. What neither of them said, sitting there on the kitchen floor at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night, was the thing underneath the thing. Ethan told himself he was doing it out of loyalty. He told himself it was about Mason, about pride, about a friend in pain. He did not let himself think about the way his chest had gone tight when she said your name was just right there, you're always the first person. He shoved that thought into a drawer and slammed it shut. And Claire told herself she was only accepting a favor. She did not let herself wonder why, of all the men she could have named in that panicked moment, of all the co-workers and cousins and strangers, the name that had leapt from her mouth was his. She shut that thought in a drawer of her own. They both thought the drawers would stay closed. They were both wrong. The next morning, Ethan was scrambling eggs when Claire came out of her room holding her phone at arm's length like it was a live grenade. "She wants to do a video call," Claire said. "My mom, tonight. She wants to meet you." Ethan dropped the spatula. "Already? I told you. She got happy." Claire sat down at the table, defeated. "We can back out. Right now. This is the moment where a smart person would back out." Ethan looked at her. He thought about backing out. He genuinely did for about 4 seconds. And then he thought about Mason smiling in a coffee shop, and he picked the spatula back up. "What time tonight?" he said. So that evening they sat side by side on their sagging couch, close enough that their shoulders touched, and Claire held up the phone, and a woman's face filled the screen, and Ethan met Linda Whitmore for the first time. "Oh," Linda said. "Oh, look at you. Robert, come here, come look." A man's face crowded into the frame beside her. Robert Whitmore had a gray mustache and eyes exactly the shade of Claire's, and he studied Ethan for a long moment with the flat, evaluating stare of a father who has been disappointed before. "So, you're the one," Robert said. "Yes, sir," Ethan said. "Ethan Parker. It's good to finally meet you both." "Finally," Robert repeated. "How long's this been going on that it's finally—" "Dad," Claire warned, "it's a fair question." "A few months," Ethan said smoothly, before Claire could panic. "We were friends first. Roommates, actually. It sort of snuck up on both of us." That part, at least, was not a lie, and maybe that was why it came out so easy. Ethan felt Claire's knee press against his in silent thanks. "Roommates," Linda said, delighted. "Oh, that's like a movie. Robert, isn't that like a movie?" "What do you do for a living, Ethan?" Robert asked, ignoring his wife. "I'm an ER nurse, emergency room over at the hospital here in Nashville." Something shifted in Robert's face, just slightly. "A nurse. 12 years now." "Huh." Robert leaned back. "That's a real job. That's a job that matters, not like some of these fellows who can't tell you what they actually do all day." And Ethan understood in that one dry sentence that Robert Whitmore had just thrown a small stone at a ghost named Mason. He filed it away. The call went on for 40 minutes. Linda wanted to know everything: where he grew up, whether he had family, what his mother was like. And here Ethan hesitated for the first time, because the truth of that was not a small thing. "My folks passed a while back," he said. "My mom when I was 19, my dad a few years after. It's just me now." The teasing warmth drained out of Linda's face and turned into something softer and fiercer. "Well," she said, "not anymore, it isn't." Ethan didn't have an answer for that. He felt Claire go still beside him, and a strange, dangerous warmth started to spread through his chest, the warmth of a man who has been cold for a very long time being handed a blanket he knows he'll have to give back. "Not anymore, it isn't," Linda said again, like she was making it official. "You're coming to Willow Creek, and you're going to meet all of us, and Evelyn is going to love you. Now let me see you two together. Sit closer. Come on, let me see." Claire went pink. Ethan put his arm around her shoulders, casual, easy the way a boyfriend would, and felt her heartbeat against his side, and told himself firmly that the way it made his own heart stumble meant absolutely nothing at all. "There," Linda breathed. "Oh, Robert, look at them." When the call ended, Claire set the phone face down on the coffee table and stared at it for a long time. "That was worse than I thought," she said. "Why worse?" "Because it went well." She turned to look at him, and there was real fear in her face now, a different kind than the night before. "It went too well, Ethan. My mom hasn't looked that happy in 3 years. Did you see her face? Did you hear her?" "Not anymore, it isn't. She adopted you in 40 minutes. "It's one weekend," Ethan said, but even as he said it, it sounded thinner than it had the night before. "What happens when we end it?" Claire said quietly. "You saw her. What happens to her when we tell them it didn't work out?" Ethan didn't have an answer for that either. So he did the thing he always did when the truth was too heavy. He made a joke and she let him, and they didn't talk about it again that night. But the drawer had cracked open just a little, and neither of them noticed the light spilling out. 2 weeks later, they packed a bag and drove north. Willow Creek was 90 minutes from the city, and somewhere around the 60-minute mark, as the highway turned into a 2-lane road and the road turned into hills, Claire went quiet and started chewing her thumbnail. "You're going to bite that clean off," Ethan said. "I need to prep you. There are things you need to know, or my family will figure it out in 5 minutes." "Okay, prep me." "My brother Tyler is 25 and he thinks he's a detective. He will ask you trick questions. He'll ask you what my favorite movie is, what I take in my coffee, whether I sleep on the left side or the right side of the bed." "Black 2 sugars," Ethan said. "You watch the same 3 romantic comedies on a loop when you've had a bad shift. And you don't sleep on either side, you sleep diagonally, which is why you were complaining for a month that your last mattress was too small." Claire stopped chewing her thumbnail. "How do you know all that?" she said. "I live with you, Claire. I pay attention." He kept his eyes on the road. "That's not hard. You're not hard to pay attention to." She didn't say anything for a mile. "My dad's going to ask about the future," she finally said, quieter than before. "He's going to ask what your intentions are. He asked Mason that once, and Mason laughed at him. My dad never forgot it." Ethan gripped the wheel a little tighter. "I won't laugh at him." "I know you won't. That's the problem." She turned toward the window so he couldn't see her face. "You're going to be so good at this that it's going to hurt when it's over." Ethan almost said something then. He almost said the thing that was sitting in his chest getting heavier by the mile. But a road sign for Willow Creek slid past the window and the moment closed, and he let it go. They pulled into a gravel driveway in front of a big white farmhouse with a porch that wrapped all the way around, and before Ethan even had the car in park, the front door burst open and people came pouring out. Linda First Arms already spread, Robert behind her, trying to look stern and failing. A young man Ethan pegged as Tyler, grinning like he was about to enjoy himself very much. And behind all of them, moving slow, one hand on the porch rail, a small silver-haired woman in a blue dress. "Evelyn, there she is," Linda cried, and pulled Claire into a hug so hard it lifted her off her feet. Then Linda turned to Ethan, and without a word, she hugged him too fierce and total a stranger holding him like a son. "Welcome home," Linda whispered in his ear, and Ethan Parker, who had not had a mother to hug him in 11 years, had to blink very fast and look at the sky. "You must be the famous Ethan," Tyler said, sticking out his hand and squeezing too hard on purpose. "I've heard so much. Well, I've heard almost nothing actually, which is weird because my sister tells my mom everything, and suddenly she has a whole boyfriend nobody knew about. Funny how that works." "Tyler," Robert said. "I'm just making conversation, Dad." "He's making conversation," Ethan agreed, meeting Tyler's eyes evenly. "I'd probably be suspicious too if I had a sister I cared about." Tyler blinked. He hadn't expected that. Ethan watched the young man recalibrate and knew he'd bought himself maybe an hour of grace before the real interrogation began. Then Robert stepped forward and shook Ethan's hand, one hard pump looking him straight in the eye. "You made good time," he said. It was not a compliment about the driving. It was a test, and Ethan somehow knew it. "Claire kept me company the whole way," Ethan said. "Made it feel short." Robert held his gaze one beat longer. Then he nodded once, and something in his face eased, and Ethan realized he'd passed something without knowing the rules. But it was the small woman on the porch who mattered, and Ethan knew it before she even reached him. Evelyn came down the last 2 steps carefully, one at a time, waving off Tyler's offered arm. She crossed the gravel and stopped in front of Ethan and looked up at him, and her eyes were pale blue and clear as spring water and absolutely terrifyingly awake. "So," Evelyn said, "you're the young man." "Yes, ma'am." "Come here, let me look at you." Ethan bent slightly because she was so much smaller than him, and Evelyn took his face in both her cool, papery hands and turned it left and then right, studying him the way a jeweler studies a stone. The whole family went quiet. Even Tyler stopped grinning. Ethan held still and let himself be seen and understood in that moment exactly what Claire had meant. This woman was not going to be fooled by a story. Whatever she found in his face, it was going to be the truth of it, whether he wanted her to find it or not. Evelyn said at last. "Grandma," Claire said nervously. "What?" Evelyn let go of Ethan's face and patted his cheek once gently. "Your soup's getting cold," she said to the whole family, and turned and started back toward the house. "Bring the boy inside. He drove a long way." And that was all. But as Ethan straightened up, Evelyn paused on the bottom step, and without turning around, she said one more thing so quiet that only Ethan standing closest could hear it. "You look at her," Evelyn murmured, "the way my Harold used to look at me. Did you know that? No, I don't suppose you did." Then she climbed the steps and disappeared inside, and Ethan stood frozen in the gravel with his heart slamming against his ribs, and Claire tugged his sleeve and said, "What did she say to you?" And for the first time since this whole lie began, Ethan Parker lied to Claire. "She said welcome," he told her. "That's all. She said welcome." Inside the house smelled like cornbread and coffee and 80 years of Sunday dinners, and the table was already set for a small army. Linda pushed Ethan into a chair, put a bowl in front of him before he could protest, and stood over him with her hands on her hips until he took the first bite. "Well," she demanded. "Ma'am, this is the best soup I've had in my life." "Oh, he's a keeper," Linda announced to the room. "Claire, he's a keeper." Claire across the table met Ethan's eyes for one quick, panicked, tender second, and he watched her try to smile and almost manage it. Tyler dropped into the seat beside Ethan and leaned in, lowering his voice. "Okay, real talk. What's her coffee order?" "Black 2 sugars," Ethan said, not looking up from his soup. "Favorite movie?" "She'll tell you it's some serious drama, but it's actually the same 3 romantic comedies over and over. She just watched one Tuesday because she had a rough day at the clinic. A dog didn't make it." Tyler sat back slowly. Across the table, Claire had gone very still because Ethan hadn't been told that last part. He'd guessed it. He'd read it off her face the second she came home that Tuesday and filed it away without either of them saying a word. "Huh," Tyler said, and there was something new in his voice, something almost respectful. Okay, Ethan Parker, maybe you're for real." "Maybe I am," Ethan said. And under the table, without either of them quite meaning to, Claire's hand found his and held on, and this time it was not for show. And this time neither of them was pretending, and neither of them said a single word about it, because saying it would have made it real, and real was the one thing they had promised each other this could never be. Across the table in her worn blue dress, Evelyn watched the two of them the way she watched everything quietly, patiently, missing nothing at all. And when Claire's hand slipped into Ethan's under the table, the old woman smiled down into her coffee cup and kept the secret and said not one word. Because Evelyn Whitmore had been young once. She had loved a man for 53 years, and she knew better than anyone at that table that there are some things 2 people can hide from the whole world, from their families, from their friends, from each other, but not from her, and not in the end from themselves. That night, long after the dishes were done and the house had gone dark, Ethan lay awake on the guest room bed, staring at a ceiling he couldn't see, replaying the feeling of Claire's hand in his, and Evelyn's voice in his ear. "You look at her the way my Harold used to look at me." He told himself the old woman was mistaken. He told himself it was one weekend. He told himself all the things a man tells himself when the truth has already arrived and he isn't ready to open the door. Down the hall in the room that had been hers since childhood, Claire lay awake too, her hand still remembering the shape of his, and she stared into the dark and thought about the way her mother had said, "Not anymore, it isn't," and the way her father had eased when Ethan spoke, and the way her whole family had opened like a door and pulled him inside without a single lock left standing. And she thought, God help me, what have I done? Because she had not brought home a fake boyfriend. She had brought home the truth dressed up as a lie and set it down at the middle of her family's table, and now she had no idea how she was ever going to take it back. The morning after that first dinner, Ethan woke before anyone else, and for one confused second, he didn't know where he was. Then it all came back: the farmhouse, the soup, the hand under the table, and he lay very still and listened to a house that wasn't his, full of people who weren't his family treating him like he was. He got up and went to find coffee, and that was his first mistake, because Evelyn was already in the kitchen. "Sit," she said without turning around. "You take it black." "Yes, ma'am. How did you know that?" "Because you're the kind of man who doesn't want to be a bother, and men like that drink their coffee black, so nobody has to fetch them anything." She set a mug in front of him and lowered herself into the chair across the table, slow and careful, one hand pressed to her chest for a moment before she settled. "Now, while it's just us." Ethan's stomach dropped. "Ma'am, how long have you loved my granddaughter?" The coffee went hot and wrong in his throat. He set the mug down very carefully so his hand wouldn't shake. "Mrs. Whitmore, Claire and I are... I didn't ask what you and Claire are. I asked how long you've loved her." Evelyn folded her hands on the table. "I'm 82 years old, and my heart could stop between one word and the next, so I don't have time to sit here and watch a healthy young man dance around a simple question. How long?" And Ethan, who had been prepared to lie to everyone at that table, found he could not lie to this woman with the spring water eyes. "I don't know," he said quietly. "That's the honest truth. I don't know when it started. I only know I noticed it too late to do anything smart about it. Evelyn nodded slowly, like a doctor who'd suspected the diagnosis all along. Does she know no? Are you going to tell her no? Why not? Ethan turned the mug in a slow circle on the table. Because if I tell her and I'm wrong, I lose the best friend I've ever had. And I've already lost enough people, ma'am. I can't afford to lose her too. I'd rather have her as a friend for the rest of my life than have her love me back for a year and then leave. For a long moment, Evelyn didn't say anything. Then she reached across the table and put her small, cool hand over his. My Harold said almost exactly those words to me, she said. In 1963, he'd been in love with me for 2 years and never said a word because he was afraid. You know what finally made him say it? What? Another man asked me to a dance. Her eyes glittered. Sometimes Ethan Parker, the only thing that makes a coward brave is watching someone else reach for what he was too scared to take. You remember that. Then she patted his hand and stood wincing and shuffled toward the stove, and Ethan sat there with his heart hammering and understood that Evelyn Whitmore had just told him something important, and he didn't yet know what it was. He found out 3 hours later. The whole family had gathered on the porch after breakfast, and Tyler was in the middle of a story, and a car turned into the gravel driveway that nobody was expecting. Ethan felt Claire go rigid beside him before he understood why. Then the car door opened, and a man stepped out, tall, easy, smiling, like he owned the ground he stood on, and Ethan didn't need an introduction. He'd know that smile anywhere. He'd been picturing it for 2 weeks. "Well, look who it is!" Mason Cole called out, coming up the walk like he'd been invited. "The whole gang's here." The porch went silent. Linda's face did something complicated. Robert stood up. "Mason," Robert said, "this is a surprise. I was passing through, thought I'd stop and say hi to my favorite family." Mason's eyes swept the porch, warm and familiar, until they landed on Claire, and then they cooled about 10 degrees. "Claire, you look good. Been a while." Ethan watched Claire's hand find the arm of her chair and grip it. He watched her try to find her voice. "Mason," she managed, "what are you doing here?" "I told you. Passing through." Mason's gaze slid to Ethan, and the smile got wider and sharper. "And who's this?" "This is Ethan," Linda said, and there was steel under the sweetness now. "Claire's boyfriend." Something flickered across Mason's face there and gone. "Boyfriend? Huh. Since when does Claire have a boyfriend?" "Since a while," Ethan said, and stood up and put out his hand. "Ethan Parker, good to meet you." Mason looked at the offered hand for a beat too long before he took it, and Ethan felt the squeeze, the same too hard grip Tyler had tried the day before, except there was nothing playful in this one. "Ethan Parker," Mason repeated. "And what do you do?" "Ethan Parker." "He's a nurse," Robert said before Ethan could answer, and there was a small pointed satisfaction in the way he said it. "Emergency room, 12 years. A nurse." Mason let the words sit there, and Ethan understood exactly what he was doing with it, understood the little curl of contempt underneath. "That's real sweet. That's wow. Good for you, man." He turned back to Claire. "Can I talk to you just for a second? In private?" "No," Ethan said. The whole porch turned to look at him. "She doesn't want to talk to you," Ethan said, keeping his voice easy, keeping it calm, the same voice he used on a frightened patient. "And you weren't invited, so I think it's about time you got back in your car." Mason's smile didn't move, but his eyes went flat and mean. "I'm sorry, I don't think I was talking to you, buddy." "You're on her family's porch," Ethan said. "You grabbed her arm in a coffee shop 2 weeks ago and told her she'd die alone. You think I don't know about that?" He heard Claire's sharp intake of breath, heard Linda's, but he kept his eyes on Mason. "So no, you don't get to talk to her in private. You don't get to talk to her at all." For a moment, nobody moved. Then Robert stepped forward and put himself half between Mason and the porch. "I think you'd better go, son," Robert said, and the son was not affection, it was dismissal. Mason looked around the porch at Linda's cold face, and Tyler's balled fists, and Robert's steady eyes, and last of all at Claire, who had stood up now and moved close to Ethan without seeming to decide to. "You know what?" Mason said, backing down the steps with his hands raised, still smiling that terrible smile. "That's fine, that's just fine. But let me tell you something, Claire." He pointed at her. "This new little arrangement of yours, I give it a month. You always get scared and run. Everybody in this family knows it. Ask them." He looked at Ethan. "Ask her nurse. Ask her how long she stays." Then he got in his car and drove off gravel spitting under his tires, and the porch stayed frozen until the sound of his engine faded down the road. "Well," Tyler said finally, "I hate that guy." Nobody laughed. Claire was staring at the empty driveway with her arms wrapped around herself, and Ethan could see her shaking, and he did the only thing that made sense. He put his arm around her, and this time it wasn't for the family. It was for her. "Hey," he said quietly just to her. "He's gone. You're okay." "How did you know?" she whispered. "About the arm. About what he said. I never told you the exact words." "You didn't have to," Ethan said. "I saw your face when you came home. I heard it in your voice. I told you, Claire. I pay attention." She turned into his chest and pressed her forehead against his shoulder, and the whole family watched, and none of them knew that the two of them had never once done this before, that every touch until now had been careful and rehearsed, and this one, the first real one, happened in front of everybody and looked exactly like love because that was what it was. Later that afternoon, Robert found Ethan alone by the woodpile and stood beside him for a while without speaking. "That took nerve," Robert said finally. "What you did on the porch. He had it coming." "He did." Robert picked up a piece of split oak, turned it over, set it down. "I want to tell you something, and I want you to listen, because I don't say this to many people. When Claire was with Mason, that boy sat at my table for 2 years, and I never once saw him stand up for her. Not once. She'd get quiet, or she'd get sad, and he'd just keep talking about himself. I used to lie awake worrying about what would happen to my girl if she married him." He looked at Ethan. "You've been here one day, and you already did the thing he never did in 2 years. So whatever you are to my daughter, whatever this is, I want you to know I see it. Her mother sees it, and her grandmother sure as hell sees it." Ethan's throat went tight. "Sir, You don't have to say anything." Robert clapped him once on the shoulder hard. "Just don't be like him, that's all I ask. Just don't run when it gets hard." And he walked back toward the house and left Ethan standing by the woodpile with a lie in his chest that was getting heavier and truer by the hour. That night, when the house was asleep, Claire knocked softly on the guest room door. "You awake?" she whispered. "Yeah, come in." She slipped inside and sat on the edge of the bed, and for a while neither of them said anything. "I need to say thank you," she said finally, "for today, for Mason." "You don't have to thank me." "I do, because nobody's ever done that for me before. Not my dad, not Tyler, nobody." She pulled her knees up. "Everybody in my family loves me, Ethan, but they all they treat me like I'm made of glass. Like I'll break. Mason treated me like I was already broken, and you stood up, and you looked him in the eye, and you didn't make it a big thing, you just made him leave. Like it was the most obvious thing in the world." "It was the most obvious thing in the world," Ethan said. Claire looked at him in the dark. "Was it?" And there it was, the moment. The drawer that had been cracked open since that first night on the kitchen floor swung wide, and the light poured out, and Ethan felt the words gather in his throat. "How long have you loved my granddaughter? Sometimes the only thing that makes a coward brave." And he almost said it. Then Claire's phone buzzed on the nightstand, and the moment shattered, and she picked it up, and her face changed. "It's my mom," she said. "In the next room. She's texting me." Claire read it, and her hand went to her mouth. "Oh, no." "What?" "She wants to have a big family dinner. Everybody, all the aunts and uncles and cousins, next month before Grandma's surgery." Claire looked up, stricken. "Ethan, Grandma's having heart surgery in 6 weeks. My mom just told me. It's serious. They're saying it's the kind of thing that she might not." Ethan sat up. "And your mother wants a dinner before. She wants the whole family together one time in case it's the last time, and she wants you there." Claire's eyes filled. She said Grandma's been telling everyone that seeing me happy with a good man is the thing she wants most before her operation. She said it would mean everything to her." The room went very quiet. "So now we're not just lying to your parents," Ethan said slowly. "We're lying to your dying grandmother about the one thing she wants before surgery she might not survive."
"Yes!"
Claire's voice broke.
"Yes, that's exactly what we're doing.
What have I done, Ethan? I started this so my family would stop pitying me, and now it's this. Now it's a woman's last wish and it's fake. And if I tell the truth, I break her heart right before they cut her chest open. And if I don't tell the truth, then the last thing I ever give my grandmother is a lie." She was crying now, the same bone-deep crying from that first night. And Ethan pulled her against him and held her, and he did not tell her that Evelyn already knew. He did not tell her about the coffee that morning, or how long have you loved my granddaughter or Harold or any of it. He held that secret alongside his own, and the weight of the two of them together was almost more than he could carry. "We'll figure it out," he said into her hair. "We'll figure it out. I'm not going anywhere." "Mason said a month," Claire whispered. "Mason's an idiot," Ethan said. "And Mason's wrong about everything, including you." She cried herself quiet against his chest, and eventually her breathing slowed, and she fell asleep there, and Ethan lay awake for hours, holding a woman he loved, and could not tell, keeping two secrets that were slowly eating him alive. And somewhere around 3 in the morning, he came to a decision that scared him more than anything Mason Cole had ever said. He decided he was going to tell her the truth. Not tonight, not here, tangled up in her grandmother's surgery and her family's hope. But after, when it was quiet, when it could just be the two of them and not the whole weight of Willow Creek pressing down, he was going to tell her and let the chips fall because Evelyn was right and he was tired of being a coward, and he had spent 11 years since his mother died being careful and quiet and never reaching for anything, and he was done. He fell asleep on that decision, and it held him together for exactly 9 days. Because on the 10th day back in Nashville, Ethan came home from a double shift and found Claire sitting on the couch with her phone in her hand and a look on her face he couldn't read. "Mason called me," she said. Every good feeling in Ethan's body went cold. What did he want? He apologized. Claire wouldn't look at him. For the porch, for the coffee shop, for all of it. He said he's been in therapy. He said he knows he was a coward and he never fought for me, and he sees that now. She swallowed. He said he wants a chance to prove he's changed. Ethan set his keys down very slowly. "And what did you say?" I said no. The cold thing in his chest loosened just slightly. "But then he said something, Ethan, and I can't stop thinking about it." Claire finally looked up, and her eyes were confused and scared. "He said, at least I never lied to your whole family about who I was. He knows. Somehow he knows this thing between us started fake. I don't know how, maybe he guessed, maybe he could just tell, but he knows. And he said if I ever tell my parents the truth about us, he'll be right there waiting to remind them who never lied to them." Her voice shook. "He's using it against me. The lie, our lie. He's going to use it to make me look like the liar and himself look like the honest one." Ethan sat down hard in the chair across from her. "That's why he showed up at the reunion. That's why the timing. He's not trying to win you back. He's trying to trap you." "And it's working," Claire whispered, "because he's right. We are lying. And the longer we do it, the worse it looks when it comes out, and the more it looks like he was the good guy all along." She put her face in her hands. "I can't tell my family the truth now, not with him waiting. And I can't keep lying with Grandma's surgery coming. I'm stuck, Ethan. I'm completely stuck, and it's my own fault." And here was the moment Ethan had been building toward for 9 days, the truth sitting right there in his mouth. "I love you. It stopped being fake for me weeks ago. Maybe it was never fake at all. Here was the moment." And he watched Claire fall apart over Mason, over the trap, over the lie. And he understood with a sick lurch that if he told her the truth right now, in this exact moment, she would never believe it was real. She would think he was just saying it to keep her from Mason. She would think he was doing the same thing Mason was doing, using the situation, playing an angle. The one time in his life he finally found the courage to reach for something, and the timing had made it impossible. So he swallowed it. Again. "Then we don't tell them yet," he said instead, hating himself. "We get through the surgery. We give your grandmother her wish. We get her through the operation. And then after, when she's healthy and it's calm, we sort it all out. Mason can wait. Mason's got nothing but time. Your grandmother doesn't." Claire looked at him for a long moment. "You'd keep doing this, even now, even knowing what it's turning into." "For you, yeah." Ethan said it before he could stop himself. "For you, Claire, yeah." Something moved across her face. some question she almost asked and then didn't. She nodded slowly and looked back down at her phone. "Okay," she said. "Until after the surgery. Then the truth. All of it." "All of it," Ethan agreed. And neither of them said which truth they meant, because they meant different ones, and that difference was going to matter more than either of them could imagine. The next 5 weeks passed in a strange, suspended kind of happiness that neither of them would admit to. They drove up to Willow Creek every weekend. Linda taught Ethan how to make Evelyn's cornbread. Robert took him fishing and told him stories about Claire as a little girl. Tyler stopped testing him and started texting him memes, which Ethan understood was the highest honor a 25-year-old could bestow. And Evelyn watched always from her chair on the porch, saying nothing, missing nothing. And every so often she'd catch Ethan's eye and give him a look that said as clear as words, "Well, are you going to be brave or aren't you?" He kept meaning to. He kept running out of moments. And then 3 days before the big family dinner, everything came apart. It started with a phone call. Ethan was at work when his phone buzzed, and it was Claire, and she was crying so hard he could barely understand her. "Claire, slow down. What happened? Is it Evelyn?" "No." "Yes." "No, she's okay, but—" Claire gasped for air. "Mason, he sent my mother a message, a long message. He told her everything, Ethan. He told her we're not really together, that it started as a fake relationship, that I made the whole thing up to look good at the reunion. He sent her screenshots, I don't even know how he got them, of a text I sent my friend Dana back in the beginning, where I called it a fake relationship, and he sent it to my mom. And my mom just called me and she's—" Claire dissolved. "She's so hurt, Ethan. She said she doesn't understand. She said she opened her whole heart to you and to think it was all pretend. She's asking me if it's true. She's waiting for me to tell her it's not true. And I can't lie to her again, I can't. But if I tell her the truth, it'll break her heart 3 days before Grandma's dinner, and Mason will have won. He'll have made me the liar." Ethan was already pulling off his gloves. "Where are you?" "I'm at home." "Don't answer your mother yet. Don't say anything. I'm coming home right now." "Ethan, you're at work. You can't just—" "I'm coming home," he said, and hung up and told his charge nurse he had a family emergency and drove home faster than he should have and burst through the apartment door to find Claire on the floor again, in the exact same spot she'd sat that first night when this whole thing began with a whisper. He got down on the floor with her the way he always did. "Okay," he said. "Okay, look at me. We're going to fix this." "There's no fixing it. He won. He beat me. He's going to sit there at my grandmother's dinner as the honest one, and I'm going to be the liar, and my mom is never going to look at me the same way again, and it's my own fault because I did lie. I started this whole thing. Stop." Ethan took her face in his hands, and it was the first time he'd ever done that, and she went still. "Listen to me. You want to know the truth. Here's the truth. You did start this as a lie. That part's real. You panicked, and you said my name, and it started fake." He held her gaze. "But it didn't stay fake, Claire. Somewhere along the way it stopped being a lie, and I don't think either of us noticed the exact moment it changed." Claire's breath caught. "I'm not saying this because of Mason." Ethan pushed on, because it was now or never, because Evelyn's voice was in his head, because he was so tired of being a coward. "I know how this looks. I know the timing is the worst timing in the history of the world, but I have to say it now, or I never will. I love you, not the fake way, not the porch way, the real way. I've loved you since before this ever started, and I was too scared to say it because I couldn't stand the thought of losing you. And I don't know how to prove to you it's not about Mason. I don't know how to make you believe me right now of all times, but it's the truth, and it's the only thing in this entire mess that isn't a lie." For a long, terrible moment, Claire just stared at him, and then she pulled back out of his hands and stood up and put her arms around herself and said the thing Ethan had been afraid of for 2 months. "You're saying this now," she said, "right now, when I just told you Mason's trying to take me back and expose us. You expect me to believe you fell in love with me, and the very first time you ever say it out loud is the exact moment it would be most convenient. Claire, how am I supposed to believe that—" Her voice cracked. "How is that different from what he's doing? He shows up right when it'll hurt the most. And now you say I love you right when I need to hear it the most. You're both using the timing. I'm not Mason. "I know you're not Mason," she shouted, and then she covered her mouth, shocked at her own volume, and when she spoke again, it was barely a whisper. "I know you're not. That's what makes it so unfair. Because I think I might, and if I let myself believe you, and I'm wrong, if this is just you being kind, being noble, trying to protect me from Mason, the way you protected me on the porch, then I lose everything. I lose you and the friendship, and the one real thing I had all at once." She was crying again. "I can't risk that right now, not with everything else falling apart. I can't. I need it to just be the friendship right now, because the friendship is the only thing I'm sure of." Ethan stood up slowly. The floor felt very far away. "Okay," he said quietly. "Ethan." "No, it's okay. I understand. I picked the worst possible moment, and that's on me." He made himself smile, and it was the hardest thing he'd ever done. "Forget I said it. We'll get through the dinner. We'll figure out Mason. I'm still your friend. That doesn't change. Nothing changes." "Everything changes," Claire whispered. "You can't unsay it." "I can try." They stood there in the wreckage of it, 2 feet apart, and further than they'd ever been, and Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket. He almost ignored it. Then he saw the name on the screen, and his stomach dropped all over again. It was Linda, Claire's mother. He held up the phone so Claire could see. Her face went white. "Don't answer it," she breathed. But it wasn't a call. It was a text. And Ethan read it out loud in a flat, careful voice because his hands had started to shake. She says, "Ethan read Ethan. I don't know what's true and what isn't anymore. Mason sent me things. I need to hear it from you, not Claire. From you. Whatever this started as, I need one honest answer before I see you at that table in 3 days. Do you love my daughter, yes or no? Don't you dare lie to me." The apartment went silent. Claire was staring at him with her hand over her mouth, and Ethan was staring at the phone at Linda's question glowing up at him. The one question, the only question. "Do you love my daughter, yes or no?" And the woman it was about was standing 6 feet away, having just begged him to take it back. He looked up at Claire. "What do I tell her?" he said softly. And Claire couldn't answer. She stood frozen, tears running down her face, caught between the truth that could save her family and the fear that could save her heart. And the phone kept glowing in Ethan's hand, and Linda was waiting, and Evelyn's surgery was 3 days away, and Mason was out there somewhere, certain he'd already won, and the whole enormous lie that had started with one whisper on a kitchen floor had finally completely run out of anywhere left to hide. "Ethan," Claire whispered, "what are you going to say?" And Ethan looked down at the phone and back up at the woman he loved and made his choice. Ethan's thumb hovered over the screen for a long time. Then he started to type, and Claire crossed the room in 3 steps and grabbed his wrist. "Don't," she said. "She asked me a direct question, Claire. She said don't lie to her, and I'm done lying. I'm done. I've been lying to your whole family for 2 months, and I've been lying to you for a lot longer than that, and I can't do it anymore. It's making me sick." "If you tell her the truth, everything falls apart 3 days before Grandma's surgery. And if I lie to her, then Mason's right about all of us." Ethan pulled his wrist free gently. "Your mom asked me one honest question. I'm going to give her one honest answer. Not about the fake relationship, not about how it started, just the one thing she actually asked." He looked at Claire. "She asked, 'Do I love you?' And I'm not going to lie about that. Not to her and not to you, not anymore." He typed 3 words and turned the phone so Claire could see it before he sent it. "Yes, I do." "Ethan, that's not a lie," he said. "That's the truest thing I've ever texted anybody in my life. Whatever else is fake that's real, and she deserves to know at least one real thing." And he hit send. The message went, the little delivered notification appeared, and then agonizingly, 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then Linda called. Ethan answered on the first ring and put it on speaker so Claire could hear, because there had been enough secrets. "Say it to me." Linda's voice came through thick with tears. "Text is easy. Say it to my face or as close as I can get. Do you love my daughter?" "Yes, ma'am," Ethan said. "I love her. I have for a long time." A long silence, then a wet, shaky breath. "Then I need to ask you something else," Linda said. "And I need you to be just as honest, Because I'm sitting here holding my phone reading a message from a man who says the two of you invented this whole thing. So I need to know, did it start real or did it start fake? Ethan closed his eyes. Claire had gone rigid beside him. This was the question that could end it all. It started fake, Ethan said. Claire made a small, broken sound. Claire panicked on the phone with you 2 months ago. Ethan went on steady, because the only way through it was straight through it. And she said she was bringing a boyfriend she didn't have, and she said my name because I was standing right there, and she asked me to pretend for 1 weekend. And I said yes. So Mason's right about that part. It started as a lie. I won't sit here and tell you it didn't. The silence on the line was terrible. But here's what Mason doesn't know, Ethan said, because Mason left before he could see it the same way he always left before anything mattered. Somewhere in the middle of the pretending, I stopped pretending. I don't know the day it happened, but by the time your grandmother took my face in her hands in that driveway, it wasn't a lie anymore, not for me. I fell in love with your daughter for real, Mrs. Whitmore, and the fake part is the only part I'm ashamed of, and I'll spend as long as it takes making it up to you. That's the whole truth, every bit of it. Claire was crying silently, both hands pressed over her mouth, and on the other end of the line, Linda Whitmore was quiet for so long that Ethan thought the call had dropped. Mrs. Whitmore, you know what the funny thing is? Linda said finally, and her voice was strange, wobbling between hurt and something else. The funny thing is, I already knew. Ethan opened his eyes. Ma'am, not the fake part. I didn't know that. That part hurts, I won't pretend it doesn't. A wet laugh. But the love part, Ethan, I've raised 2 children and buried a husband's parents and watched my own mother love my father for 50 years. I know what it looks like when a man loves a woman. I saw it the first weekend you were here. I saw it on that porch when you stood up to Mason. You didn't do that for a lie. Nobody puts themselves in front of a man like that for a lie. She sniffed. So no, the love didn't surprise me. What surprised me was finding out my daughter didn't trust me enough to just tell me she was lonely and scared. That's what hurts, baby. And this last was clearly for Claire. Not the lie, the not trusting me. Mom, Claire choked out. Mom, I'm so sorry. I know you are. I didn't know how to tell you I didn't have anyone. Every year you'd ask about Mason like he was coming back, and I couldn't. I couldn't keep being the daughter everybody pitied. Claire Elizabeth. Linda's voice went sharp and soft at once. Nobody in this family ever pitied you. We worried about you. There's a difference. And if you couldn't tell the difference, then I did something wrong as your mother, and I'm sorry for it. A pause. Now, both of you listen to me, because I've been thinking about this for the last hour, and I've made up my mind. Ethan and Claire looked at each other. You're both still coming to the dinner, Linda said. All of it happens like nothing changed, because here's what I know that Mason doesn't. Your grandmother is having her chest cut open in 3 days, and the one thing keeping her strong right now is the thought of seeing her granddaughter happy. And you are happy, aren't you? Both of you for real. Neither of them answered, because they hadn't figured that part out, because 2 hours ago, Claire had told Ethan to take it back. That's what I thought, Linda said gently. You've got some things to work out. That's fine. You work them out. But you work them out before Saturday, because I will not have my mother going into surgery with a broken heart, and I will not let that snake Mason Cole sit at my table and be right about my family. Do you understand me? Yes, ma'am, Ethan said. Yes, Mom, Claire whispered. And one more thing. Linda's voice hardened. You leave Mason to me. He sent those screenshots to the wrong mother. She hung up. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Claire sank onto the couch and put her head in her hands. She knew, Claire said. This whole time, my own mother saw it before I did. Ethan sat down next to her careful leaving space. Claire, about what I said, on the floor, and to your mom. He swallowed. I meant it. But I also meant it when I said I'd take it back if you needed the friendship. So you tell me what you need. Whatever you say, I'll be that. I'll be your friend and never mention it again, or I'll be the other thing. But it's your call. I'm done deciding things for you. Claire lifted her head and looked at him, and her eyes were red and wrecked and searching. I need time, she said. That's the honest answer. I heard you say it to my mom. I heard how you said it, and part of me believed you completely. And part of me is still terrified it's the Mason thing. The timing thing. She wiped her face. Can you give me until Saturday? Can we just be us? Get through the dinner, and then after, when Grandma's through the surgery and Mason's dealt with and everything's calm, can I give you a real answer then, a clean one? One I know isn't just fear or gratitude or panic. Until Saturday, Ethan said. Yeah, I can do that. Thank you. She reached over and took his hand and squeezed it. For not making me decide right now. Mason would have made me decide right now. I keep telling you, Ethan said softly. I'm not Mason. They spent the next 2 days in a fragile, careful truce, roommates again, friends again, both of them tiptoeing around the enormous thing sitting in the middle of the apartment. And on Saturday morning, they drove up to Willow Creek for the dinner, and neither of them knew that Linda Whitmore had spent those same 2 days making some phone calls of her own. The house was full when they arrived. Cars lined the gravel drive, aunts and uncles and cousins spilling across the porch, kids running in the yard. Linda met them at the door and hugged Claire hard, and then hugged Ethan even harder and whispered in his ear, "It's handled. Don't you worry about a thing." Ethan didn't have time to ask what she meant because Tyler grabbed him and pulled him into a knot of cousins, and Robert put a beer in his hand, and for a little while it was just a big, loud family dinner, and Ethan let himself sink into it, into the belonging, into the thing he'd never had. And then he saw Evelyn. She was in her chair by the window, smaller than the last time, paler, an oxygen line running under her nose that hadn't been there before. But her eyes were the same spring water clear, and when she saw Ethan across the crowded room, she lifted one thin hand and crooked a finger at him. He went to her and knelt down beside her chair. "You told her," Evelyn said. "It wasn't a question. You finally told my granddaughter you love her. And Linda. You told everyone. How do you—" "Because Linda tells me everything, and because your face has been carrying a stone for 2 months, and today it isn't." Evelyn smiled, and it turned her whole face into a map of soft creases. "I told you, Ethan Parker. I told you what made my Harold brave. Somebody else reached for what he was too scared to take. Was I right?" "You were right," Ethan admitted. "Mason came for her, and I couldn't stand it." "Course you couldn't," Evelyn patted his hand. "Now, come closer. I have to tell you something, and I don't have the breath to say it twice, and I need to say it before this dinner because I have a feeling this dinner is going to be interesting." Ethan leaned in. "When I was a girl of 19, Evelyn said quietly, I told a lie a lot like Claire's. There was a boy my family hated, and I told them I'd met someone better, someone I made up, and then I panicked and I dragged poor Harold into it because Harold was my friend, and Harold would have walked into fire for me." Her eyes went distant and warm. "And by the end of that summer, the lie had come true exactly like it's coming true for you two. So I know how this story goes, young man. I've lived it, and I'll tell you the ending for free." She squeezed his hand with surprising strength. The lie was never the sin. The lie was just the door. What matters is who walks through it and stays. Harold stayed 53 years. You look like a stayer to me. Are you? "Yes, ma'am," Ethan said, and his voice broke on it. "I'm a stayer." "Good boy." She let go of his hand and settled back. "Now go get me a plate before Tyler eats all the cornbread. And Ethan—" He turned back. Her eyes had gone sharp again. "Keep an eye on the door. Linda's got a surprise coming, and I don't think that boy Mason knows yet that he's the one being surprised." Before Ethan could ask, the front door opened, and Mason Cole walked in. The room didn't go silent because half the family didn't know him, but Ethan felt Claire go still across the room, felt the temperature drop around the people who did. Mason was in a nice shirt holding a bottle of wine, wearing the confident, easy smile of a man who thinks he's about to win. "Linda," Mason said warmly, crossing to her. "Thank you so much for the invitation. It means the world. I know things got complicated, and I appreciate you giving me the chance to clear the air with the family." And Ethan understood. Linda had invited him. Linda had brought Mason here on purpose. "Of course, sweetheart," Linda said, and her voice was so warm, so genuine that even Ethan almost believed it. "After everything you told me, I felt like the whole family deserved to hear the truth, all of it, out in the open, so everybody can move forward honest." She turned to the room and raised her voice, and people started to quiet down. "Everybody, everybody, can I have your attention? Mason here has something he wants to share with the family. He reached out to me this week with some very important information, and he was so passionate about the truth coming out that I thought, well, let's let him say it to everyone at once. Mason's smile flickered. This wasn't quite how he'd pictured it. But he recovered because men like Mason always recover, and he stepped forward. Well, Mason said, I don't want to cause trouble, but this family took me in for a lot of years, and I care about all of you, and I couldn't sit by and watch you get deceived. So, the truth is, Claire and Ethan's relationship isn't real. Claire made it up. She invented a boyfriend so she wouldn't look bad at the reunion, and that man over there is basically an actor she hired with rent money. He gestured at Ethan, and his voice took on a wounded, righteous tone. I have the texts. Claire called it a fake relationship in her own words. I'm not making this up. I felt like you all deserve to know who's really honest with you and who isn't. The room was very quiet now. Aunts and uncles looked at each other. Ethan stood frozen. Claire had gone chalk white, and Linda Whitmore smiled. Thank you, Mason, she said. That was very honest. Now it's my turn to be honest. She reached into her cardigan pocket and pulled out her own phone. See, Mason, when you sent me those screenshots, I did what any mother would do. I got upset. I cried. I called my daughter. Linda's voice was still warm, still pleasant, and that was what made it terrifying. But then I did something you didn't count on. I actually talked to the man you called an actor. And do you know what he did, Mason? When I asked him point blank if it started as a lie, he said yes, immediately. No dodging. He told me the whole ugly truth of it, the panic, the favor, all of it, when a single lie would have saved him. And then he told me he'd fallen in love with my daughter for real, and I believed him because I watched him stand on my porch and defend her while you were busy telling her she'd die alone. Linda's eyes went cold. That part you left out of your little presentation. The coffee shop. You want to talk about honesty? Let's talk about a grown man grabbing a woman's arm in public and telling her nobody would ever love her. Mason's face had gone gray. That's not what happened. It's exactly what happened because Ethan told me and Claire told me, and then I called your sister Mason. Linda held up the phone. Your sister, Rachel. You remember Rachel. She and I got along real well back when you were dating my Claire. So I called her this week and I asked her, Rachel, honey, is Mason really in therapy like he's been telling everybody? Is he really a changed man? Linda tilted her head. You want to tell the family what Rachel told me, Mason, or should I? Mason didn't say anything. He couldn't. Rachel told me you got dumped, Linda said gently, brutally, 6 weeks ago, by a woman named Priscilla who left you for reasons Rachel was very happy to detail. And Rachel told me that the day after Priscilla left, you started talking about how you'd made a mistake with Claire, and how Claire was easy, how Claire always came back, how Claire would be grateful to have you. Linda's voice cracked with fury on the last words. You didn't come back for my daughter because you love her, Mason. You came back because somebody else threw you away, and you remembered there was a girl who used to make you feel important. You came to my mother's dinner 3 days before she has her heart cut open to blow up my daughter's happiness so you'd have something to fall back on. She lowered the phone. So, who's the honest one exactly? The room had turned. Ethan could feel it, the whole crowd of aunts and uncles and cousins, the temperature swinging hard against Mason faces, going from confused to disgusted. Robert had come to stand at his wife's shoulder, arms crossed, saying nothing, which was somehow more menacing than shouting. This is your twisting all of it, Mason said, backing toward the door, the confident smile long gone. I came here to help. You came here to hurt a family that fed you for 2 years, Robert said quietly. Now you're going to leave it, and this time you're not driving off making threats. This time you're just leaving. Go on. Mason looked around the room one last time for one ally, one sympathetic face, and found none. His eyes landed last on Claire. Claire, he said, come on. You know me. You know I'm not. I do know you, Mason, Claire said, and her voice was steadier than Ethan had ever heard it. That's the whole problem. I finally know you. And you know what? You were right about one thing back at the coffee shop. You said no man would ever pretend to love me and mean it. She looked at Ethan across the room, and something in her face had changed, had settled, had decided. You were right. Nobody would pretend that long and mean it. which is how I finally figured out that the man across the room isn't pretending at all. So thank you, Mason. You lying to hurt me is the thing that finally showed me what's real." Mason opened his mouth. Nothing came out. And then he turned and walked out the door, and this time nobody watched him go, because the whole room had turned to look at Claire, and Claire was only looking at Ethan. For a long moment, the two of them just stared at each other across a room full of her family. "You said Saturday," Ethan said quietly, and half the room couldn't hear him, but Claire could. "You said you'd give me a clean answer on Saturday." "It's Saturday," Claire said. "It is." She crossed the room. She crossed it the way she'd crossed it 2 days ago, to stop him from texting her mother, except this time she wasn't stopping anything. She stopped in front of him close, and the whole family pretended not to watch and watched anyway, and Evelyn in her chair by the window leaned forward with her thin hand pressed to her chest. "I've been so scared," Claire said low just for him, "this whole time. Scared of Mason, scared of my family, scared of losing you. And I kept telling myself I couldn't trust what I felt, because the timing was wrong, because you might be being noble, because I might just be grateful." She reached up and, echoing something Ethan didn't know she'd witnessed, took his face in both her hands the way Evelyn had done in the driveway 2 months ago. "But you know what I realized just now, watching Mason lie and watching you tell the truth, even when it cost you everything, I realized I've had it backwards. I wasn't scared of trusting you. I was scared of how much I already did." Ethan couldn't breathe. "So here's my clean answer," Claire said. "The one I promised you. It didn't start real. You're right. It started as the stupidest, most panicked lie I've ever told." Her eyes filled, but she was smiling now. "But somewhere between the cornbread and the porch, and you knowing my coffee order, and you getting down on the kitchen floor with me every single time I fell apart, it turned into the truest thing in my life. I love you, Ethan Parker. Not the fake way, the real way, the way you said, and I'm not scared of it anymore." The room erupted. Linda burst into tears. Tyler let out a whoop. Robert put his arm around his wife and cleared his throat about 6 times. And Ethan Parker, who had spent 11 years being careful and quiet and never reaching for anything, pulled Claire against him and held her like he was never letting go, and kissed her in front of her entire family, the first real kiss after 2 months of pretending, and it didn't feel like the end of a lie. It felt like the beginning of the truth. And over Claire's shoulder across the room, Ethan found Evelyn's eyes. The old woman was crying, but she was smiling through it, and she lifted one thin hand off her chest and pointed at him and mouthed 2 words silent under all the noise. "Stayer. Good." Then Evelyn's hand pressed flat against her chest, and her smile went strange, and she slumped sideways in her chair. And someone screamed. The scream cut through the joy like a knife, and for one frozen second the entire room stood paralyzed, and then Ethan was already moving. 12 years of emergency medicine took over before his heart could catch up. He crossed the room in 3 strides, dropped to his knees beside Evelyn's chair, and his hands were already checking, already working, even as some distant part of him was screaming her name inside his own head. "Everybody back!" he heard himself say, and his voice came out flat and calm and commanding, the voice he used in the worst hours of the worst nights at the hospital, the voice that had nothing to do with the terror underneath it. "Give me room. Robert, call 911. Now tell them cardiac arrest. 82-year-old female. Tell them she has a known heart condition and surgery scheduled. Go." Robert went fumbling his phone, and Ethan tipped Evelyn's head back and put his cheek near her mouth and watched her chest. Nothing. No breath. No rise. "Grandma!" Claire was sobbing somewhere behind him. "Grandma, no!" "Claire, I need you." Ethan didn't look up. He couldn't look up. He was already lowering Evelyn to the floor, one arm behind her thin shoulders, laying her flat. "I need you right here, right now. Kneel down next to me. Hold her hand and talk to her. Tell her you're here. People can hear longer than you'd think. Talk to her." And Claire, who Ethan had spent 2 months watching fall apart on kitchen floors, did not fall apart. She dropped down beside her grandmother and grabbed the old woman's hand in both of hers and pressed it to her cheek and started talking low and fierce and steady. "I'm here, Grandma. I'm right here. You hold on. You hear me. You hold on, you stubborn woman. You don't get to leave now, not after you were right about everything." Ethan found the spot. He laced his fingers together, locked his elbows, and began compressions. He counted out loud because it kept the panic at bay. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, driving down harder than felt possible on a body that frail. Because he knew from 1,000 nights that you had to be willing to hurt them to save them. That gentle killed people. He felt something give under his hands and made himself keep going because a cracked rib heals and a stopped heart doesn't. "Come on," he gritted between counts. "Come on, Evelyn, you're a stayer. You told me. You said 53 years. Come on." The family had pulled back into a ragged, weeping circle. Linda had both hands clamped over her mouth. Tyler had gone the color of ash. Somewhere a child was crying and being pulled from the room. 30. Ethan counted and tipped her head, pinched her nose, gave 2 breaths, watched her chest rise under his air, and went back to compressions. "How long?" Robert said, phone still pressed to his ear, voice shaking. "They asked how long she's been down." 90 seconds, Ethan said, not breaking rhythm. "Tell them I'm doing CPR. Tell them I'm a nurse. Tell them to hurry." He drove down on her chest, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And he was aware of Claire's voice in his ear the whole time. "I'm here, Grandma. I'm here. Don't you dare." And he was aware of his own arms starting to burn, and he was aware in the coldest, most professional corner of his mind of the numbers, of what the odds actually were, of how rarely this worked outside a hospital, of the fact that he had personally called time of death on more of these than he had ever brought back. He shoved that corners of his mind into a drawer and slammed it shut, the way he'd learned to slam drawers shut. And he kept counting. 2 minutes, he said. "Robert, the ambulance." 8 minutes out, they said. "That's too long." The words were out before Ethan could stop them, and he saw Linda flinch, and he cursed himself. "It's fine, I've got her. I've got her until they get here. Claire, keep talking." "You come back to us," Claire was saying, tears streaming, gripping the limp hand. "You come back. You've got a surgery in 3 days. You don't get to skip it by doing this. That's cheating, Grandma. That's cheating, and you never cheat." And Ethan drove down on the old woman's chest and prayed to a God he wasn't sure he believed in. And somewhere around the 3rd minute, when his arms had gone from burning to numb, when the fear was clawing its way up out of the drawer, he'd shut it in when he was starting to do the math. No nurse ever wants to do on a person they love. Evelyn gasped. It was a huge, ragged, whooping breath, the sound of a swimmer breaking the surface, and her whole body arched with it, and her eyes flew open wild and unfocused, and Ethan sat back on his heels with his numb arms trembling and said, "There she is. There she is. Okay, okay. Evelyn, you're okay. You're okay. Don't try to move. You're okay." The room made a sound like a single held breath finally releasing. Linda collapsed against Robert. Tyler sat down hard on the floor where he stood, and Claire pressed her grandmother's hand to her lips and sobbed. But they were different sobs. Now they were the other kind. "Ethan," Evelyn rasped, her voice a thread. Her eyes had found his face. "Ethan Parker, I'm here. Don't talk. Save your strength. The ambulance is coming." "You," Evelyn whispered, and her cracked lips moved into the smallest ghost of a smile. "Told you. Stayer." And Ethan Parker, ER nurse, 12 years and 1,000 of the worst nights, put his face in his shaking hands and wept. The ambulance came 6 minutes later. Ethan gave the report to the medics in clean-clipped professional sentences. The time down, the compressions, the recovery, the meds she was on, all of it. And they nodded and worked fast and got her loaded, and Ethan climbed into the back of the ambulance without asking permission because nobody was going to stop him. Claire climbed in behind him. The door shut. The family scrambled for cars. At the hospital, the two of them sat in a waiting room for 4 hours while doctors did things behind doors they couldn't go through, and this time it was Claire who got down on the floor, sliding out of the plastic chair to sit on the cold tile with her back against the wall, and Ethan who got down beside her, because that was how they did it. That was who they were. "You saved her," Claire said, staring at nothing. "She was gone. Ethan, she was actually gone, and you brought her back." "The medics saved her. The doctors are saving her. I just kept her going till they got there." "Stop it." Claire turned and looked at him fierce through the exhaustion. "Stop making it small. You saved my grandmother's life on my mother's living room floor. Say it. Say I saved her." Ethan swallowed. "I saved her." "Yes You did. Claire took his hand, the same hands that had done the compressions, and turned it over and pressed her palm flat against his. You know what I keep thinking? I keep thinking about how she collapsed the exact second I told you I loved you. The exact second. Like she was waiting. Like she wouldn't let herself go until she knew I'd said it out loud. She's not going anywhere, Ethan said. She's got a surgery in 3 days, and she's too stubborn to miss it. You said so yourself. Claire laughed wet and broken and leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat on the floor and waited. Around 2 a.m, a doctor came out and found them, and the whole family surged to their feet, and the doctor held up her hands. She's stable, the doctor said, and the words hit the room like rain on a drought. She's awake and she's stable and she's ornery, which is a very good sign. She's asking for a specific young man. She was very clear. She said, and I'm quoting her, tell the nurse to get in here, not the doctors, the nurse. Ethan looked at Claire. Claire pushed him toward the door. Go, she said. She wants you. They let him back through the doors, and he found Evelyn propped up in a hospital bed, hooked to more machines than seemed fair for such a small woman, pale as paper, but with her spring water eyes wide open and sharp as ever. There he is, Evelyn said. Her voice was weak, but it was hers. Sit down. My legs are tired just looking at you standing there. Ethan pulled a chair to the bedside and sat and took her hand the way Claire had. You gave us a scare, he said. I gave myself a scare. Evelyn's mouth twitched. 1 minute I'm watching my granddaughter finally tell a man she loves him, the happiest moment of my whole rotten year, and the next minute I'm looking down at some fool doing chest compressions on an old woman on Linda's good rug. Her eyes glittered. Then I realized the fool was you, and I thought, well, if I'm going to come back from the dead for anybody, it might as well be for the boy who looks at my granddaughter the way my Harold looked at me. You scared 10 years off my life. I'll pay them back. She squeezed his hand with more strength than he expected. Listen to me, while it's just us, because I meant what I said before, about the door, about staying, and now I've got a new thing to say, and I've only got the breath for once. Her face grew serious. You could have panicked out there. A lot of people would have. Instead, you got calm, and you got to work, and you brought me back. Do you understand what that tells me about you? That I do my job. No. Evelyn's voice was suddenly fierce. It tells me that when the worst thing happens, when everything falls apart, and everybody else is screaming, you're the one who stays calm and does what has to be done. That's the whole of marriage, Ethan Parker. That's the whole of it. Not the wedding, not the pretty parts, the 3 a.m. parts, the parts where somebody's heart stops and somebody has to keep going. She held his gaze. My granddaughter has spent her whole life waiting for somebody who won't run when it gets to the 3 a.m. parts. And tonight, on my daughter's living room floor, she watched you not run. You understand me. She saw exactly who you are tonight. So don't you waste it. Ethan's throat was too tight to speak. Now go get her, Evelyn said, settling back into the pillows, her eyes drifting shut. Tell her I'm fine and I'm mean and I want cornbread as soon as these robbers let me eat. And Ethan. One eye opened. The surgery's in 3 days still. They said it doesn't change anything tonight. It was just my heart telling everybody it's serious in case anybody forgot. So you get her through the next 3 days. You keep her strong. Because I intend to walk into that operating room and I intend to walk back out and I intend to dance at a wedding before I'm done. You hear me? Yes, ma'am, Ethan whispered. Good boy. Her eye closed. Now scoot. Old women need their sleep. He went back out to the waiting room, and he told the family she was stable and awake and demanding cornbread, and Linda cried, and Robert cried, and Tyler pretended he had something in his eye, and Claire threw her arms around Ethan's neck and held on. 3 days later, Evelyn went into surgery. They were all there. The whole family packed into a surgical waiting room that was too small for them, and the hours crawled by like they were made of tar. Claire couldn't sit still. She paced, she sat, she paced again. She chewed her thumbnail down to nothing, and Ethan followed her with his eyes and let her move, because he'd learned that Claire dealt with fear by moving, and he dealt with it by going still, and the two of them together made one whole functioning person. What if she doesn't make it? Claire said somewhere in the 4th hour, stopping in front of him. What if she comes back from a heart attack just to die on the table 3 days later? What if the last thing— Hey, Ethan stood up and took her hands. The last thing you said to her, if it comes to it, which it won't, but if it did, was that you love her, and she was right about everything. And she watched you tell the man she picked out that you love him too. Claire, if a person has to go, that's the send-off. That's the one everybody prays for. She went into that room having seen her granddaughter happy. You gave her that. Whatever happens, you gave her that. Claire pressed her forehead to his chest. When did you get so good at this? I've had a lot of practice with the 3 a.m. parts, Ethan said quietly, echoing words she hadn't heard, and held her. In the 5th hour, the surgeon came out. He was still in his scrubs, his mask pulled down around his neck, and the whole family froze, trying to read his face, and Ethan, who had watched 1,000 surgeons walk out of 1,000 doors, read it before the man said a word, and felt his knees go weak with relief. She did great, the surgeon said. She did really great. The valve replacement went exactly how we wanted. No complications. Her heart's already responding beautifully. She's a tough lady. She's in recovery now, and if all goes well, she'll be home in a week. And honestly, with the repair we did, she should have a lot more good years than she would have had. He smiled. I understand there was an incident a few days ago. Cardiac arrest at home. Someone did CPR. Him! Claire said, instantly pointing at Ethan. He did. He's a nurse. The surgeon looked at Ethan and nodded slowly, professional to professional. Then you should know something. When we opened her up, we could see the CPR was done right. Textbook. A lot of home CPR does more harm than good, but whoever worked on her knew exactly what they were doing, and it kept her brain and her organs perfused long enough that she came into this surgery strong instead of damaged. He extended his hand. You didn't just keep her alive that night, you kept her whole. She walked into my OR because of what you did on that floor. Good work. Ethan shook the man's hand and couldn't say anything at all. And Claire looked at Ethan the way he realized he'd been looking at her for 2 months, and he finally understood what Evelyn had been trying to tell him, that being seen, truly seen, for exactly who you are, was the thing everybody spent their whole life waiting for, and that it had just happened to him in a hospital hallway in front of the family he'd been pretending to belong to, except he wasn't pretending anymore. He never had to pretend again. That evening, when the family finally cleared out and it was just the two of them driving back to the apartment in the dark, Claire was quiet for a long time. I've been thinking about something, she said as the highway lights slid past. About what my mom said. About the not trusting her. About how I was so scared of everybody pitying me that I built this whole lie instead of just telling the truth. Yeah, I was scared of the same thing with you. Claire turned in her seat to look at him. That's why I couldn't just believe you on the kitchen floor when you said you loved me. Not because I thought you were lying, because I couldn't believe I got to have it. I've spent so long being the girl who gets pitied, the girl Mason left the girl living under her ex's shadow, that when something real finally showed up, I was more comfortable calling it fake than admitting it was mine. She wiped her eyes. The lie was easier than the truth, Ethan. That's the awful thing I figured out this week. The lie was easier because if it was fake, I couldn't lose it. And you kept trying to hand me the real thing, and I kept running because the real thing can be lost, and I couldn't stand to lose it. Ethan drove in silence for a moment, letting it land. You're not going to lose it, he said finally. That's the part you keep not believing. I'm not Mason. I'm not going to run when it gets to the 3 a.m. parts. Your grandmother said that's what marriage is, the 3 a.m. parts. And I've spent 12 years living in the 3 a.m. parts, Claire. It's the only thing I actually know how to do. Stay calm and stay put when everything's falling apart. He glanced at her. You want to know why I fell in love with you? It wasn't the fake relationship. It was watching you every single day come home from that clinic having held some family's dying dog and cry about it, and then get up the next morning and go do it again. You stay too. You've always stayed. You just never had anybody stay back. Claire was crying openly now, but she was smiling. So here's what I'm offering, Ethan said. No more lies, not even easy ones. You get the real thing, and yeah, the real thing can be lost. That's true. That's the deal. But I'm telling you right now tonight on this highway, I have no intention of ever losing it. I'm in the 3 a.m. parts for good if you'll have me. Claire reached across the console and took his hand off the gear shift and held it in both of hers. I'll have you, she said. For real this time. No pretending. No pretending, Ethan agreed. and they drove home through the dark, hand in hand, two people who had started with the stupidest lie either of them had ever told, and had somehow impossibly arrived at the truest thing either of them had ever known. A week later, Evelyn came home from the hospital, and the first thing she did before she even let them get her settled on the porch was fix Ethan with her spring water eyes and say, "Well, have you asked her yet? Asked her what Grandma Claire said." And Ethan went very still because he knew exactly what Evelyn meant, and Evelyn knew he knew, and the old woman just smiled and said, "Never you mind. Get me my cornbread. And Ethan." She caught his hand as he passed. "Remember what I said, a wedding. I'm not done yet. Don't you keep me waiting too long." And Ethan looked at Claire laughing in the doorway, healthy and whole, and finally believing it was hers to keep. And he thought, no, he wouldn't keep her waiting. Not one day longer than he had to. He didn't keep her waiting long. But it didn't happen the way he planned, because with Ethan and Claire, nothing ever happened the way anyone planned. He'd bought the ring 3 weeks after Evelyn came home. He'd had a whole thing worked out, a nice dinner, the right restaurant, the words rehearsed 100 times in the shower and the car and the break room at the hospital. And then, on an ordinary Tuesday, Claire came home from the clinic and sat down on the kitchen floor in their apartment, in the exact spot where all of this had started, and put her face in her hands. "Bad day?" Ethan asked, and got down on the floor with her the way he always did. "We lost a dog today. Old golden retriever. His family had him for 14 years. The dad, this big grown man, he sat on the floor of the exam room and held the dog and he kept saying thank you for 14 good years, over and over." Claire wiped her eyes. "And I thought about Grandma, about how close we came, and I thought about how you never know how many good years you get, and I just needed to sit on the floor for a minute." And Ethan, who had a ring hidden in a sock in his dresser drawer waiting for a fancy restaurant, looked at the woman he loved, crying on the same kitchen floor where she'd first asked him to pretend, and understood that this was the moment, not the restaurant, this one, the real one, the 3 a.m. one, even though it was 6 in the evening. "Hang on," he said and got up. "Where are you going, Ethan? I just need you to sit with me." "I know. I'll be right back. 2 seconds." He came back with the ring, and he didn't have a speech ready because the speech had been for the restaurant, so he just got back down on the kitchen floor next to her, and he opened his hand. Claire stopped crying. She stopped breathing. "You're right that you never know how many good years you get," Ethan said, his own voice shaking now. "So I don't want to waste any of them waiting for the right restaurant. This is where you asked me to pretend to love you. Right here, this exact spot on this ugly floor, and I figure it's only fair that this is the spot where I ask you to let me love you for real for the rest of my life." He held up the ring. "I'm not going to run at the 3 a.m. parts, Claire. I'm going to sit on the floor with you every single time. That's the whole offer. Will you marry me?" Claire looked at the ring and looked at him and let out a sound that was half sob and half laugh, and she launched herself at him so hard they both toppled sideways onto the floor, and she was kissing him and crying and saying yes into his mouth. "Yes, yes, of course, yes." And Ethan Parker held her on the kitchen floor and laughed up at the ceiling of the little apartment that had somehow, against every odd, become the place where his whole life had turned around. "On the floor," Claire said, pulling back to look at him, laughing and wrecked. "You proposed to me on the floor." "It's our floor," Ethan said. "It's where you told the best lie you ever told. It's where you said yes to a stranger's crazy favor." "You weren't a stranger. That's the thing I figured out too late." He tucked her hair behind her ear. "You were never a stranger. I think I loved you before I even knew there was anything to love. I just didn't have a word for it yet." They called Evelyn first, before Linda, before Robert, before anyone, because they both knew without saying it that if any one person deserved to hear it first, it was the old woman who'd seen the whole thing coming from the driveway on the very first day. Evelyn answered on the 3rd ring. "Well," she said, before either of them had said a word, because she could hear it somehow in the quality of the silence. "It's about time. Which floor did he do it on, the restaurant or the ugly one at home?" Claire burst out laughing. "How do you always know everything?" "Because I've been alive 82 years, and I've buried a husband I loved for 53 of them, and there is nothing about love that surprises me anymore." Evelyn's voice was warm and wet. "Now, When's the wedding? And don't you dare say next year. I did not get my chest sawed open and come back from the dead to wait a whole year for a party. I want it soon. I want it while I'm strong enough to dance. I told your young man. I said I intend to dance at a wedding before I'm done, and I meant it. Soon, Grandma Claire promised. We'll do it soon. They did it soon. They married in the fall in the yard of the farmhouse in Willow Creek, under the same wraparound porch where Ethan had first stood up to Mason Cole, on the same ground where Evelyn had first taken his face in her hands and seen straight through him. Linda cried through the entire ceremony. Robert walked Claire down the aisle and halfway there stopped and turned to Ethan and said in a voice loud enough for the front rows to hear, "You didn't run. I told you not to run and you didn't. Thank you." And then he put his daughter's hand in Ethan's and could not say another word. Tyler was the best man and gave a speech that started as a roast and dissolved by the end into him openly weeping about how he'd tried so hard to catch Ethan in a lie that first weekend, asking him about coffee orders and favorite movies, and how the terrible truth was that Ethan had known every answer, had known Claire better than Tyler knew his own sister. And that was the moment Tyler had known this man was going to be family, whether the relationship was real or not, because you could fake a relationship, but you could not fake paying that much attention to a person. And Evelyn danced. She'd been threatening it for months, and everyone had smiled and nodded and quietly worried. But when the music started, the old woman got up out of her chair, waved off every hand that reached to help her, and walked to the middle of the dance floor under her own power. And she found Ethan, and she held out her arms, and she said, "You, first dance is mine. Claire can have you for the next 50 years. This one's for the woman who saw it first." And Ethan Parker danced with an 82-year-old woman in the yard of a farmhouse, slow and careful, her hand light as a bird in his, and she looked up at him with those spring water eyes and said the last important thing she would ever say to him. "I want to tell you a secret," Evelyn said as they swayed. "About that day in the driveway, when I took your face in my hands and everybody held their breath waiting to see if I'd approve of Claire's new boyfriend." Her mouth curved. "I wasn't checking to see if you were good enough for her. I knew that in about 4 seconds. I was checking to see if you knew. If you had any idea yet that you were already in love with her." She patted his cheek the way she had that first day. "And you didn't. You had no idea. You thought you were just doing a favor for a friend. And I thought, oh, this poor boy. This poor boy has no idea his whole life is about to change and it's already too late for him to stop it." She laughed softly. "It's the best kind of love you know. The kind that's already happened by the time you notice it. Harold and I had it, and now you and Claire have it. And that young man is the only thing I ever wanted for my granddaughter. Not a rich man, not a handsome man, a man who was already in love with her before he even knew to try." Ethan couldn't speak. He just held the old woman a little closer and kept dancing. And over her silver head he found Claire watching them from the edge of the dance floor, in her wedding dress, crying and laughing at once. And he thought his heart might actually break from the fullness of it. "Take care of her," Evelyn murmured against his chest, "and take care of yourself. And name a daughter after me someday if it's not too much trouble. Evelyn's a good, strong name. It's held up for 82 years. I promise," Ethan said. "All of it. I promise." Evelyn lived another 4 years. 4 good, strong years, exactly like the surgeon had said. She was there when Ethan and Claire bought their first house, a little place with a yard 20 minutes from the hospital. She was there front row, beaming, when Claire graduated from the veterinary program. She'd been too scared to start for years, the one she finally enrolled in, because as she told Ethan, she'd spent too long being afraid of things she wanted, and she was done with that. And she was there in a rocking chair on the porch of that little house, holding a newborn baby girl in her arms, with tears running down all the creases of her face when Ethan and Claire told her the baby's name. "Evelyn." "You didn't," the old woman whispered. "You told me to," Ethan said. "You said it was a good, strong name. You said it had held up for 82 years. 86 now," Evelyn corrected, but she couldn't stop crying, and she held the baby and rocked her and said her own name over and over like a prayer, and Claire had to look away because she couldn't bear how happy she was. Evelyn passed away that winter in her sleep in the same farmhouse where she'd raised a family and buried a husband and danced at a granddaughter's wedding she'd refused to miss. She went the way everyone hopes to go, quiet and unafraid and full up with a life well spent. And at the funeral, when it was Ethan's turn to speak, he stood up in front of the whole family that had taken him in when he had no one, and he told them the truth. He told them all of it. He told them how it started with a lie, how Claire had panicked on the phone with her mother and invented a boyfriend and said his name because he was standing in the kitchen. How he'd agreed to pretend for one weekend, one dinner, one simple favor. He told them the part they'd never known, the part Mason had tried to weaponize, and Linda had diffused the whole embarrassing fake beginning of it. And then he told them what Evelyn had told him. She said the lie was never the sin. Ethan said, his voice steady, even though his eyes weren't. She said the lie was just the door. And she was right. Because I walked through that door thinking I was doing a favor, and on the other side of it was the entire rest of my life. My wife, my daughter, all of you. A family I never had and never thought I'd get. He looked out at them, at Linda and Robert, and Tyler, at the cousins, and aunts and uncles, at Claire, in the front row holding little Evelyn. I lost my own mother when I was 19. I spent 11 years after that being careful and quiet and never reaching for anything because I'd learned that the things you reach for get taken away. And then Claire told one panicked lie, and this old woman took my face in her hands in a driveway and saw the truth I couldn't see yet. And she spent the next 4 years quietly, patiently, stubbornly refusing to let me be a coward. She told me what made her Harold brave. She told me a stayer stays. She told me to name a daughter after her. He had to stop for a moment. She gave me my whole life back. And the funny thing, the thing she'd want me to say, is that it all started with a lie. The best thing that ever happened to me started with the worst kind of dishonesty. And it worked out anyway, because underneath the lie, from the very first second, the important thing was already true. He looked down at Claire, and she was crying, and he wasn't ashamed to be crying too. She figured that out before either of us did, he said. She always figured everything out first. So wherever she is now, I hope she's with Harold, and I hope they're dancing, and I hope she knows that the door she pushed me through was the best thing anybody ever did for me in my whole life. After the funeral, Ethan and Claire drove home in the dark, the way they'd driven home so many times, and little Evelyn slept in her car seat in the back, and for a long while, neither of them spoke. "Do you ever think about it?" Claire finally said. "How close we came to never happening. If I hadn't panicked, if I'd said any other name, if you'd said no." "All the time," Ethan said. "I almost said no to the whole thing, you know, that first night on the kitchen floor. I almost told my mom the truth and let everybody pity me. If I'd done that, none of this exists. No wedding, no house, no Evelyn asleep in the back seat." Claire shook her head slowly in the dark. "Our entire family, our whole life, all of it came out of the stupidest lie I ever told. That should scare me. Why doesn't it scare me?" "Because Grandma was right," Ethan said. "The lie was just the door. What mattered was who walked through it. Anybody can tell a lie. Mason told plenty. But a lie doesn't turn into a life unless the people telling it are the kind of people who stay." He reached over and found her hand in the dark. "You stayed. Every single time it got hard, you stayed. And I stayed. We were stayers before we ever knew we loved each other. That's the part that was always real. Everything else was just details." Claire held his hand and watched the highway lights slide past the same lights they'd driven under. The night he first told her he wasn't going anywhere, and she thought about how the girl on the kitchen floor 2 years ago, the girl who couldn't believe anyone would ever pretend to love her and mean it, that girl would never in 1,000 years have believed where the lie would lead. "People ask us how we met," Claire said softly. "Did you ever notice at parties, at the clinic, wherever, they ask how we met and we always just kind of smile and say it's complicated? Because it is complicated. It's not, though. That's what I finally figured out." Claire turned to look at her husband, her face lit and unlit by the passing lights. "It's actually the simplest thing in the world. A scared girl told a lie because she couldn't believe she deserved the real thing. And a lonely man said yes to that lie because he'd already fallen in love and didn't know it. And an old woman saw both of those truths on the very first day and spent the rest of her life making sure we didn't waste them." She smiled. "That's not complicated, Ethan. That's just a love story that happened to start in a strange place. All the best ones do. Ethan lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. His eyes on the road, his daughter asleep behind them, the woman he loved beside him, driving home in the dark, toward a life he'd built out of the last thing on earth he ever expected to build it from. And he knew with the bone-deep certainty of a man who'd been shown exactly who he was on a living room floor with his hands on a dying woman's heart that Evelyn had been right about all of it right from the very first 4 seconds in that driveway. The lie was never the sin. The lie was only ever the door. And two people who were only supposed to pretend they belonged together had walked through that door and stayed and stayed and stayed until the pretending fell away entirely and left behind the truest thing either of them would ever know. Because in the end, love was never about who you fooled or what you started with or how the story began. It was about who was still there on the floor at 3 a.m. when everything fell apart and somebody had to keep going. Ethan Parker stayed. Claire stayed. And that more than any vow or any ring or any lie that ever cracked open into truth was the whole entire story. Years later, when little Evelyn was old enough to ask real questions, she asked her father the one everybody eventually asked. She was 9, sitting on the kitchen floor of that same little house watching Ethan cook, and she said, "Dad, how did you and Mom actually fall in love?" And Ethan turned off the burner and got down on the floor with his daughter the way he'd gotten down on 1,000 floors with her mother, and he decided she was old enough for the truth. "It started with a lie," he told her. "Your mom was scared and lonely, and she told her family she had a boyfriend when she didn't, and the name she picked out of thin air was mine. So for a little while we pretended." Evelyn's eyes went wide. "You lied to Grandma Linda, to Great-Grandma." "We did, and I'm not proud of that part." Ethan leaned back against the cabinets. "But here's the thing I want you to understand because your great-grandmother taught it to me, and I think it might be the most important thing anybody ever taught me. She said the lie was never the sin. The lie was just a door." "What does that mean?" And Ethan tried to explain to a 9-year-old the thing it had taken him 30 years to learn. He told her that most people think love is a feeling that arrives like weather, that you meet someone and lightning strikes and you just know and everything after is easy. He told her that's the version in all the songs and all the movies, the version where love is something that happens to you, something you fall into like a hole in the ground. But that wasn't the truth, he said. That was never the truth. The truth was that love wasn't the lightning. Love was what you did after the lightning on all the ordinary days when there wasn't any lightning at all. Love was a choice you made, and then made again, and then made 10,000 more times on the good days, and the boring days, and the days when everything fell apart. Love wasn't the feeling of wanting to stay. Love was the staying itself. "Your great-grandmother figured that out before anybody," Ethan said. "She married Harold when they were young, and she stayed with him for 53 years, and she told me once that the wedding was the smallest part of the whole thing. She said anybody can promise to love somebody on a beautiful day when they're all dressed up and everyone's happy. She said the real marriage is the 3 a.m. parts, the part where somebody's sick or scared or crying on the floor and you get down on the floor with them. Not because you feel like it, not because it's romantic, just because that's where they are, and you decided a long time ago that wherever they are is where you're going to be." Evelyn thought about that for a while, chewing it over the way her mother chewed her thumbnail. "So the lie didn't matter?" she asked. "The lie mattered," Ethan said carefully. "Lies always matter, but the lie wasn't the story. The lie was just how the story started. See, your mom and I could have told that lie and then just walked away from each other. Plenty of people would have. We could have done the fake weekend and gone back to being roommates and never spoken of it again. That's what most people would have done. The lie doesn't turn into a life on its own. It only turns into a life if the people telling it are the kind of people who stay when it gets hard." He smiled. "And your mom and I, without either of us knowing it, we were already those people. She stayed with me every time I was tired and quiet and hard to love. I stayed with her every time she got scared and tried to run. We were staying for each other before we even had a word for what we were doing. The lie just gave us a reason to be in the same room long enough to notice." He told his daughter about Mason, then in the way you tell a child a hard thing gently. He told her there had been a man once who was charming and handsome and said all the right words and who ran the second things got difficult. And there had been him, her father, who wasn't charming and fumbled all his words and had lost his own family young and was scared of reaching for anything. And the great secret, the thing nobody tells you, was that the second man was the one worth having. Not because of the words, because of the staying. "Anybody can say I love you," Ethan told her. "Mason said it to your mom 100 times, and it was worth nothing because when the hard part came, he was gone. Words are cheap, baby. Words are the cheapest thing in the world. Your great-grandmother taught me that, too. She said, don't listen to what a person says when everything's easy. Watch what a person does when everything's hard. That's where the truth is. That's the only place the truth ever is." He thought about how he'd learned that lesson himself on his mother-in-law's living room floor with his hands on a dying woman's heart. How Claire had watched him not run and had finally believed him not because of anything he'd said, but because of what he did when it mattered most. "Your mom didn't believe I loved her when I told her," Ethan said. "She thought I might be lying or being nice or feeling sorry for her. Words weren't enough. Words are never enough for the people who've been lied to before. She only believed me when she watched me refuse to give up on her grandmother. That's when she knew. Not from what I said, from what I did when it was 3 in the morning and everything was falling apart." Evelyn was quiet for a long moment. "So how do you know if it's real?" she finally asked. "If words don't count, how do you actually know?" And Ethan gave her the answer his own great teacher had given him, the answer he'd carry to the end of his own days. "You watch for the staying," he said. "That's it. That's the whole secret. Everybody wants to be swept off their feet, and that's fine. That's fun. But it's not love. Being swept off your feet is a feeling. Love is when somebody helps you back up over and over for the rest of your life. When you want to know if it's real, don't ask how they make you feel when things are good. Ask who's still standing there when things are bad. Ask who gets down on the floor with you. The person who stays, that's your answer. That's always your answer. It was true for your great-grandmother and Harold, and it was true for me and your mom, and someday when you're grown, it'll be true for you. The lightning doesn't matter. The staying is everything." He reached out and tucked his daughter's hair behind her ear, the same gesture he'd made to her mother 100 times. "Your great-grandmother told me the best kind of love is the kind that's already happened by the time you notice it," he said softly. "I didn't understand her when she said it. I thought love was supposed to announce itself, but she was right. I loved your mom before I ever knew I did. It snuck up on me while I was busy pretending, and the pretending fell away, but the love underneath it was there the whole time from the very first day, waiting for me to be brave enough to see it." He smiled at his daughter, this child named after the woman who'd seen all of it first. "That's the thing about real love, baby. You don't fall into it in one dramatic moment. It builds quiet and slow out of 1,000 small choices to stay, and one day you look up and realize it's the strongest thing in your whole life, and you can't even remember the moment it started because it didn't have a moment. It had 10,000 of them." Evelyn leaned her head on her father's shoulder, there on the kitchen floor, and thought about it the way children think about the big things they'll only fully understand much later. "Great-grandma sounds like she was really smart," she said. "She was the smartest person I ever knew," Ethan said. "And she spent her whole life trying to teach me one thing. That love isn't a feeling you find. It's a promise you keep, over and over, especially when it's hard, especially at 3 in the morning, especially when it would be easier to run." He kissed the top of his daughter's head. "Anybody can start a love story. Your mom started ours with a lie of all things. But it's not the starting that makes it real. It's the staying. It was always the staying." And as the evening light faded, and Claire's key turned in the front door, and his daughter's small, warm weight leaned into his side, Ethan Parker understood as fully as a man can understand anything that the old woman had handed him, the one truth worth passing down. Love was not the door. Love was not even the walking through. Love was the staying on the other side forever, no matter what. That was the whole of it. That was everything Evelyn had known, and everything she'd tried to teach him, and everything he would spend the rest of his life proving true. The staying was the love. It always had been.